Real quick, before I even get into anything today, guys, have you ever watched one of my videos and thought, man, I would like to discuss this topic further with Quincy himself? Well, there's an app for you and there's a community for you now, and it's called Flick. Flick is a football community where you can live chat with your favorite creators about your favorite team. Ace Boogie, a guy I have on the show regularly, has one for the Cincinnati Bengals, and now I have one for the Cleveland Browns. So if you're interested in seeing what Flick is all about, please download the Flick app in your local app store. Once you sign up, look for the dog chat room, and then you'll be able to discuss this video and many other videos like it in the future, and also be able to live chat with me during the actual game. So if that's something that interests you, please check it out. So the Browns right now, as I've contended all year, are what you would call a good team, a very good offense, but also a very flawed team. And one way flawed teams fix their flaws is through the trade. And with the trade deadline coming up, I thought I'd explore some trades that the Browns should make or the Browns won't be able to make. What are those trades? Well, let's talk about it. So I want to make sure that I tell you guys to subscribe and be notified and all of that jazz so you don't miss a single thing. But also want to get my dog checks out. Austin, Mark Brunette, Andre Griffin, Otis Wolf, IT Rex, Jesus Serrano, Seth Harrison, the Picktowns Browns Backer Club, shout out, and Max Out Dojo, the old reliable. Shout out to all you guys. Thank you for joining the Dog Check tier on Patreon. It's amazing the support you guys have shown. There has really been just encouraging, and some of the things has really been vital and encouraging. Again, thank you guys for doing that, and I'm more than happy to give you guys your dog check. All right, now let's talk about these trade rumors. So trade ideas can get a little crazy, right? I think a lot of fans tend to go with the biggest trade idea first, right? Because that's the big name guy they want. That's the marquee player. That's the guy who's going to fix everything. And for the Browns, they feel like, hey, let's bring in somebody who's like Minkah Fitzpatrick to fix the secondary, much like the Steelers did with Minkah Fitzpatrick. And that, on the surface, makes a ton of sense if you just look at it on paper, because the Browns actually do have the inner workings of a good defense. You have two good defensive linemen that are reliable in Sheldon Richardson and Myles Garrett, who's a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. Denzel Ward is one of the best defensive backs in football. Terrence Mitchell isn't terrible. And your linebackers have really overachieved this season in both coverage and run stuffing. So everything's not bad. It's just your safeties have been injury-ridden, and even when they're not injured, they've been awful. And that leaves a lot of people looking for better solutions. And with Ronnie Harrison stepping in there and actually playing well at that strong safety position, everybody's eyes are obviously on Andrew Sadeo, who, if not for Baker Mayfield's heroics, would be the absolute dog of this week after giving up that touchdown at the end of the game there to Joe Burrow. So it's no shock that fans are desperate to get him out of there, find an upgrade somewhere. And the depressing reality to that trade request is that there aren't really a ton of options. But one option that is semi-available is Justin Simmons, who's a very good free safety. He's exactly what the Browns need. He's not a great safety. He's not Minkah Fitzpatrick, but if the Browns were able to get their hands on him at a reasonable price, it would solve a lot of problems. But that's the issue, is you're not going to get Justin Simmons at a reasonable price. Free safeties in general nowadays, don't go off the market for a reasonable price. Look at any safety that's been traded that's been worth anything. They have gone for incredible prices. Minkah Fitzpatrick, Jamal Adams. Just look at how much they went for. Budda Baker, without an interception, signed a gigantic contract because safeties are valued. A guy like Eric Murray, who wasn't even a good safety, signed with Houston on a big deal. Now, it was Bill O'Brien that signed him to it, but still, that just tells you how much value the Browns put in the free safety position. And I don't think there's a lot of fixes there. Some people have suggested, Clinton Dix, but he got cut from Dallas. And it's not like Dallas is a better secondary than the Browns. Eric Reed could be brought in, but he has similar issues to Andrew Sadejo when it comes to foot speed. And the Browns had one opportunity, I think, that would have did a good job in fixing the solution for a little bit when it comes to foot speed in signing Demarius Randall off the street after he got cut from Oakland. But then that begs the question, if you want Demarius back in this organization after how it ended with him and also just where he's at as a player. But that's all null and void now because he plays for the Seattle Seahawks. And always there is the mysterious, aloof Earl Thomas, who has somehow not found his way on the NFL roster yet this season. It doesn't look like he's going to be on the NFL roster. And it honestly looks like he got the shadow ban from the NFL this year. So none of those options are what you would call great solutions there. And I get why people look at Justin Simmons and say, hey, Browns could go for Justin Simmons. But one, the price tag on Justin Simmons is going to be much more than you're going to be willing to pay. I believe you're probably going to have to surrender a 1 and maybe a 3rd. And that's Justin Simmons is good. He ain't worth that. He's not Minkah Fitzpatrick. He's not going to change this defense in that dramatic of a fashion. And then you have to ask yourself, hey, do you want to spend all these assets to get Justin Simmons right now when you can also get Justin Simmons in free agency because he's going to walk away from Denver and you might be able to get him without forfeiting all these assets and also having these assets so you can acquire more safeties or more, whatever you need down the line. So that's kind of why the Justin Simmons thing, it makes a ton of sense from a player personnel level, but it just doesn't make a ton of sense in practice to me. But here's one trade that's not going to excite a lot of people that I think makes a ton of sense. And it's really a part of a group of trades that I would consider a raid of the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, the first guy I think everybody thinks I'm talking about is a guy like Carlos Dunlap or AJ Green or Geno Atkins. And while I am talking about Carlos Dunlap, the main guy I want to extract from the Cincinnati Bengals is John Ross III. Now, I've never been a big John Ross guy or a big John Ross fan, but I do see the upside in John Ross, and I also see a massive opportunity for him and a massive opportunity for the Cleveland Browns lined up here because I think this offense that the Browns have needs a guy who's a dedicated burner because you're not going to have Odell there. Donovan Peoples-Jones is a fast player. He's not necessarily what you would call a burner, but he's fast, and he's not a guy you can send on end arounds that would do much damage with it. But John Ross, it's a completely different deal. This is the fastest guy when it comes to 40 times in the NFL right now, and I think he's a perfect match, both for what he wants and both for what the Browns want, and maybe even for what the Bengals need, because I know people are going to look at this and say, hey, Quincy, that's a in-division trade. It's never going to happen, but it's really not when it comes to John Ross because the Browns have already played the Bengals twice. The Bengals are pretty much out of contention for the division, if anything. So it's not like you're going to have to play them again. It's not like it's going to cost you the playoffs or the division this year because that's clearly out. And at this point, if you're Cincinnati, you got a former first-round pick who's disgruntled among a ton of other players who are disgruntled, who are making this locker room just a hard environment for your young head coach and Zach Taylor to coach in, and you're doing absolutely nothing with this guy. So why not get something for him when you're going to let him walk in free agency anyways at the end of the season? Why not get something for this guy? Why not get a 2022 fifth or a 2021 sixth round pick for a guy that's going to be rotting on your roster? I think it makes a ton of sense for the Browns. Anything above a 4th round pick really doesn't matter because 5th, 6th, 7th round picks ain't going to make the roster next year and the year after with how this team is built. So those picks are expendable for a team like the Browns, but for a team like Cincinnati, those picks are still valuable. You can still find good players, good linebackers and good running backs in that area of the draft. So that pick has a lot of value there. It has more value than a player you're not letting get snaps or even be active when he's healthy. So for the Bengals, this kind of makes sense if they can get out the head that they're trading him technically in division, but that doesn't really matter because the division race is over and you're not playing the Browns anymore. For the Browns, this makes a ton of sense because Odell Beckham's out for the year, and the Browns, again, need that deep threat, need that burner, need somebody to play in a similar role that Brashard Perriman played for the Cleveland Browns in 2018, which is a guy who can exclusively go deep, run down the field fast. Baker can throw the ball deep and just get it to him. That's what you need. And, you know, Bashard Perriman, when he came into this room with Jarvis Landry, he was not necessarily deemed the hardest worker. He was not the best catcher of the football. But, you know, he spent some time in that locker room with Jarvis Landry, and those two things changed because Jarvis is really strong leadership in that room, and also because the opportunity fit him more. Just like the opportunity here in Cleveland is going to fit John Ross here a lot better than it did in Cincinnati. If you're John Ross, you need veteran leadership and you need opportunity because you're going to be a free agent next year. And right now, all you got is bust on your chest. Like, that's all you got to your name is bust. So you need an opportunity to produce and give teams a reason to give you any money next year or to keep you in the league. And the Browns are a good opportunity, and the Browns have that veteran leadership there to help you develop as a professional football player and as a professional when it comes to all the things that aren't games but are surrounding the game. So for the Browns and the Bengals, this makes a ton of sense for both sides. I hope they get this deal done. This would make a lot of sense. The Browns can get a deep threat with a ton of upside for a cheap price. The Bengals can get rid of somebody who's causing some locker room issues because he doesn't want to be there and isn't really contributing to the on-field product anyways, for a asset that they're going to be able to take advantage of, and the Browns are going to be able to get rid of an asset, and the Browns are going to be able to offload some assets they really didn't have a lot of use for anyways. Another guy I want to get from the Bengals is obviously Carlos Dunlap. Why? Because the other edge rush position has not been satisfactory. I think you need more depth. I think you need more bodies on that defensive line, period. Just haven't been the same since you lost Andrew Billings to an opt-out. And look, for this Browns defense, I think there's two legitimate ways you can make it better and make it more acceptable than what it is. One, you can trade for Justin Simmons and give up, you know, a first, a second, and all those assets for a guy like Justin Simmons, who's going to be a free agent after this year. Or you can bolster this defensive line, add some depth to this defensive line to minimize the amount of times you have to blitz. Because when the Browns have to blitz a lot, that's when their coverages go to Duke. I prefer the latter option. I think that's more feasible for the Browns to do over the trade deadline. I think Carlos Dunlap can be a big part of it. Carlos can at least, at minimum, produce at a level to where he can step in and it won't be the massive hole that it is when Myles Garrett leaves the field. Very least, you're getting a capable backup to Myles Garrett, because one of the biggest problems for this defense is when Myles Garrett leaves the field, nobody's able to get any pressure, and you just can't have that happen. I like Porter Gustin as an energy player and as an occasional pass rusher, but he just can't hold it down when Myles needs a water break, which is leading to Myles being fatigued at the end of these games. You get somebody like Carlos Dunlap in there, he can take some of those snaps away from Olivier Vernon and maybe be more productive, and that can lead to Olivier taking some of those snaps from Myles and helping Myles kind of regenerate. Adrian Claiborne getting in the mix more. You know, it just gives you that depth and that rotation to where you're not relying on Myles so much, and you don't have to have Myles be so gassed at the end of these games. A more well-rested Myles, the better defensive play you're going to get, because Myles Garrett has proven to be the defense on this team, quite frankly. Last guy I'm going to talk about is Ryan Kerrigan, and it's for much of the same reasons as a Carlos Dunlap. The Browns need that reliable second pass rusher. They also need that depth on the defensive line. Ryan Kerrigan's a guy who can play inside and outside and help you out there when it comes to depth. So, you know, a lot of the same reasons. He's a little bit more expensive than Carlos Dunlap and older than Carlos Dunlap. He wouldn't be a preferable option, but he would be a good option there. And again, the Browns' biggest problem is what they do when Myles isn't on the field, and this guy kind of solves that issue of what you do when Myles isn't on the field. But that's my thoughts on some of the trades that the Browns should pursue during the trade deadline. Let me know your trade predictions, not just in the comment section, but also in the Flick chat on the Flick app. Let me know in those places. I'll be happy to interact with you guys there. But again, guys, thank you for watching. Have a great day. Have a good night.